testament to the community that you guys are willing to spend a beautiful Sunday kind of listening to an intrinsically kind of difficult topic like Afghanistan. But to give you a little context of who I am the Director of Operations for this group called Afghan Medical Professional Association of America. And essentially it's a professional organization of about 500 Afghan American doctors in the United States. But where I come in is we've been able to develop a telehealth network so that we were able to provide medical and mental health care to people in Afghanistan or the diaspora that are in other countries like Qatar, Pakistan, Uzbekistan. And we've even started to provide remote mental health care for those in the Virginia area. Also, just because I have too many titles, I am the Senior Policy Advisor for this group called Minority Veterans of America. And it's an organization that advocates and provides community for minority veterans. And that's essentially anybody that doesn't really fit into the traditional veteran, quote unquote, mold. So we have people from different genders, religions, ethnicities, races. I mean, it's really just designed to provide community support and resources for this community. And, you know, we do that by having a chapter network that connects people together, but also engages in community projects. To provide that purpose and that need, we have a leadership program. And we do a lot of advocacy on the Hill. That's kind of my role in making sure that veterans are, and minority veterans are included in talks about how VA care is decided, what kind of benefits are awarded, and make sure those issues are known. And you're probably wondering why these two backgrounds have come together. I mean, I'm an aggressively white kid. Why am I working for a group of with a group of Afghan American doctors, or why a person that's doing domestic policy is talking about Afghanistan? But as you guys are probably aware of, last year the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and for about 3 weeks in August, and up until this day, there has been a chaotic, frenzied evacuation for those trying to escape Afghanistan. And I kind of fell into this effort. Before August, I was ostensibly a college kid on summer break. I was enjoying the weather, I was working, I was doing legislation on the Hill. But I had really no experience in Afghanistan. I was there once with the military. I'm familiar with it because of my work. But I didn't really know anybody on the ground. But that kind of changed until a friend reached out to me and said, hey, we need people to help with some of the administration stuff. We need somebody to kind of reach out to employers and collect data verification to really just find these documents for people that are trying to escape the country to get legal pathways to the United States. And I thought, no, that's easy. I can spend like a couple hours a day, my computer, be in front of the TV, an easy way to do my part. Well, 24 hours later, I was with a group of about 2 other people, and we had a list of 1,500 names. And these were people that didn't just need employment verification documents. They didn't need help with their SIV or P1, P2 visas. They needed help getting through checkpoints. They needed medical help. They needed help getting to the gate and onto a plane. And we did not know what we were doing. The person that I was working with, he studied as an archaeologist, but he also owns a machine learning company. And the other person was a recent grad at Vanderbilt. So these are people that had a desire to help, but didn't really know the language, didn't have any background in foreign policy, did not really have any background in humanitarian aid. But we quickly had to learn. We tried to find the groups that we thought might have the answers, but we quickly found out that really nobody has the answers for a situation like this. And those that are fairly well equipped didn't have the capacity to deal with it. So we kind of learned as we go. And I guess one of the cases that would be most emblematic of it is this little girl that we worked with asthma. We were getting hundreds and hundreds of messages on these phone apps called WhatsApp and Signal, and usually there were just people saying, hey, I worked as such and such, I got this death threat, or my brother was killed, or whatever, yeah, can you help us? Well, we got that message from her brother, the 17-year-old, but with a caveat of, my sister is really hurt too, can you provide some medical help? So we, again, didn't know what we were doing, but we knew an ER doctor that did. So, just using the power of our phone, we collected the information from the brother, got pictures, got basic vitals, got basic demographic information, and would send that over to the doctor who would look at it and then provide treatment advice for the brother on how to kind of stabilize it, how to take antibiotics, and just make sure she was going to survive until we were able to get her out of the country. And while we were doing this, we were trying to figure out how to get her out of the country. Her family didn't have an immediate pathway out. Her father worked for the US government and was killed through the service, but they were not eligible to get through the gate and onto a plane on its surface. So we started reaching out to my contacts, my friends, and we developed a kind of a network where it got to the point where, again, the power of the phone, we were working with special operations teams on the ground to get and help guide them to their location, how to avoid Taliban checkpoints. And, ultimately, we were able to get them into a safe house where these soldiers were able to stabilize her. And we kind of thought, oh, thank God, like, this is taken care of. She's safe. We can move on to the next case. Well, they stabilized her and they left her at the airport, but then they had no plane. And there was just the announcement that non-US citizens or LPRs were going to be allowed in military aircraft. So we're like, oh, is she going to be left at the airport? So that led to another journey where we reached out to anybody and everybody that had an airplane. We reached out to the Canadians, the British, the US, we were talking with Flotus's team, we were just trying to outsource this as much as possible to get a seat. It got to the point where we were working with an Afghan reporter, and there was the New York Times charter plane for reporters. So we kind of did a little bit of a deal where it's like, hey, if we get you to the airport, will you bring this family with you on this charter? But of course, as ultimately these things go, there was this added caveat of her brother was the only communication that we had, and his cell phone has been on for 24 hours, and he's been on it for 24 hours. So of course it's died. So we knew his phone was going to die, and we ultimately said, hey, stay at this location. We know your exact location right now. We'll send somebody for you. And God bless that kid. He was calm, cool, and collective, unlike anybody else I've seen in that situation. He stayed where he was at. And the last message that we got from him was, there are people in uniform approaching, and they're bringing us on a bus. And then his phone died. So we didn't know, does that mean, were they us? Were they going to bring her on a bus to the plane? Were they going to bring her a bus out of the airport? We didn't really know. We didn't really know until we got a picture from them in Qatar, where they arrived safely. That's Asma, that's the sister, and that's the mother. I was trying to figure out how to get the recording, but we got this message from her that was just like, it was like one of her first English phrases, but it was like, I'm fine, thank you. And it was just, in a time that was just so many hardships, just so many dark things. It was good to be able to just have that kind of win. And this case ultimately kind of proves to be the foundation for my work that I'm doing now. Because from this, we realized that there was a need for medical care for people that were either in remote locations or because of what they did in the government or who they were or what they believed in, wouldn't be safe to go out to public. And that's how I got connected with Katie. Like, we were able to connect with Google and AMPAA, and I met a fantastic group of Afghan American doctors who I work with, and we were able to kind of coalesce to build something new. We were able to figure out the legal and liability ramifications of working in a country with no recognized government to provide medical care in kind of a space that nobody has really done it the way that we've done it with volunteers. And there were a lot of organizations that helped, but I think if there's one takeaway through this entire experience, is it wasn't the organizations, it was the people. Because going back to Katie, she was very generously provided by AMPAA to kind of help us deliver and coordinate these services. But she didn't just say, hey, we're gonna set up this thing, best of luck. She helped us tailor it. She helped us figure out what we needed, what we didn't. And this was an evolving process. I kind of feel bad at the beginning because she provided this entire system that we didn't use in its original format because we were trying to apply what we thought they needed onto a system that really wasn't what they needed. Yeah.
Real quickly, just so you guys know how this evolved. Originally, Google is a partner of AMPAA, my company that I work at, and they reached out to us because one person, Titus, works closely with a group that Hanna works with, and like that chain of people, Titus also works at Google, and so he was like, oh, maybe AMPAA can help. And he reached out to AMPAA saying, hey, can you guys stand up telehealth for us? So AMPAA is really fast at standing up telehealth. It's what we do. And so we said, sure, no problem. And we stood up something within 24 hours. And Google went, whoa, wait, that's way too fast. We're not ready. and so we backtracked and thought of, like, is this really what we can use? And we had to keep going back and forth of what can we use that can be used in Afghanistan, and not just there, but Kabul and all these different military bases and places where these people were stuck in various sectors that we didn't necessarily know where they would be. And so it was a lot of unknown territory, opening up ports and places and IP ports that we had never worked in before at AMPAA. And they kind of discovering as we went with volunteer providers. That was another unknown. Like, normally we work with providers that are at specific hospitals and you know where they are. These are all volunteers. Everything about this was volunteer. So I was volunteered from AMPAA. Hannah's volunteered from Minority Vets, and all the providers are volunteered from everywhere. And so it was a lot of, sort of making it up as you go. And I was kind of the project manager along for the ride, helping coordinate things and bringing that project management expertise to what we were doing. And then Hanna was bringing the coordination of the everything else-ness to it. And then we found AMPAA, and actually it was the Vanderbilt College woman who was just hunting through groups that could help, that found AMPAA and brought along these 500 providers that we wouldn't have found otherwise. So it was all just individual people that brought this journey together that would have otherwise not have happened. So I know we didn't end up using AMPAA's technology, but the core group of like 4 or 5 of us that worked together still performed miracles that wouldn't have otherwise happened, which I'm proud of, even though we didn't use AMPAA's technology. I'm so proud we did this.
I mean, and I just want to reinforce that it wasn't just the technology that was brought. I mean, again, going back to ostensibly being a college student, I was in the military and we had small groups of teams under me, but that's a much different situation than a whole bunch of volunteers. I can't go to a volunteer and be like, hey, don't be an idiot. They're not going to come back. So, I mean, it wasn't just the technology and the resources that AMPAA brought, but Katie brought her expertise. And going to what she mentioned with that kid at Vanderbilt, she is one of my favorite people out of this, because she came into this saying, I want to help, but I don't do well with high stress situations. So I just want to do some data entry, I want to do some back-end stuff. And again, 72 hours later, she was speaking to ambassadors to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan by just like reaching out to her networks. And she ended up helping get a bus full of female athletes through the gate and onto a plane. I mean, the phrase that I kind of use when talking about this experience is that it's been the most effed up networking experience in my life. And it's because I've been able to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds in such a short amount of time. Like, I should not be able to speak to special operations people on the ground. I should not be able to speak to ambassadors. I should not be able to speak to doctors on relatively short notice. But it's that reason that we were able to be successful, because everybody, regardless of their skill set, regardless of their background, and regardless of what they actually wanted to accomplish with this, offered to help, and they were able to find their places to help. And because of that, we were able to kind of fill the gaps that, government organizations, everybody was kind of really unable to provide. We have hundreds and hundreds of stories like this, but this is kind of emblematic of what kind of work I'm doing right now. We got another message, again, through WhatsApp, this time Seot, and it was from an organization I work with, which is a group of former special operators, and again, volunteers. And they had a family they were working with whose infant was really having some profound medical issues. The kid's head was swelling, they had a fever, they weren't eating, they were vomiting, and they wanted to connect with us to be like, hey, is there anything we need to do? So, they sent us pictures, they sent us kind of some basic information, and I sent it to one of our doctors, a pediatric neurosurgeon, and they saw the kid and was like, hey, this is cranial stenosis. This kid is gonna need surgery like within the next 24 to 48 hours. Well, we're like, oh crap, he's in Mazar Sharif. The hospital system there has kind of collapsed as the doctors flag, and we need to bring him to Kabul, where they're gonna have the facilities to kind of provide this care. But how do we do that? So, at this point we had connections on the ground, so we reached out to some of our connections and were able to find a car. But as things go, they were driving along, and about halfway in this little rocky area where there's just absolutely nothing, their car broke down. So we were trying to figure out, A, how do we get the car repaired? But at this point we were trying to say, well, is there any kind of medical facility involved in the area? So we can have this pediatric neurosurgeon kind of talk through with some kind of medical provider how to do brain surgery, basically. Just drill little holes in the Fortunately, that didn't come to that. We were able to get the car, running back again, and we were able to just figure out different ways to stabilize the kid until we were able to get them into a hospital in Kabul, and the kid ultimately survived. And yeah, I would have loved to. I have a picture of the family, and the kid looking up at the father with this little smile. But the guy's still unfortunately in Afghanistan, and I didn't want to, share his identity. I guess the thesis of all of this is that I get so many people that say, hey, I want to help. And it's regardless of whether it is, doing stuff in Afghanistan, whether it is helping homeless veterans, helping just different communities. But they say, I don't have any experience, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the expertise. But I really want to counter that, because I don't have the experience, I don't have the expertise, I don't have the knowledge. I I should not be involved in anybody's healthcare. Like, if you guys have medical emergencies, don't come to me. Like, but, you know, to a certain extent, it's a willingness to help, it's a willingness to learn, it's a willingness to find the people that want to help. And there are a lot of people that want to help. And I think everybody wants to help. And just don't be intimidated to help, because even if you're an accountant, I was throwing my neighbor a whole bunch of just documents and saying, hey, I need this inputted on this form, would you mind doing that? And he just did data entry. And that helped just as much as reaching out to the doctor, reaching out to the guy on the ground, because without those documents, you're gonna get to the gate. And nobody has time to just do it all. So I want to thank you guys for allowing me to speak. It's really kind of just been a privilege to, again, have you guys listen to me on Sunday afternoon. But I want to thank Katie. This is the first time we've actually read it. But I feel like we spent hours and hours on meetings, and you know, everyone's happening, and even, I mean, it really just shows that, like, yeah, she was a project manager for this at AMPAA, but she was so much more, and everybody involved in this was so much more. So, yeah, people are good.
So,
Thank
Hanna,
you.
so what type of things that what people can help do? Do you have like a list of things that people can help?
I do. I will have to forward that on
Yes. Okay.
later.
I'll share it through constant contact,
Yeah,
so we can
yeah.
share it with the church.
Yes. Yes.
Right now, for this specific issue, the most important thing that anybody can do is help bring awareness for this thing called the Afghan Adjustment Act. And essentially, most people that were brought into the country were brought into this thing called port parole. And these are individuals that have already gone through the immigration screening, but because they were brought into this process, they need to apply for asylum again and have to go through the asylum process. The problem with that is, though, that they can't have access to a social security card, driver's license, employment. There's just a lot of different ambiguity and uncertainty and inability to support themselves. And you know, I will say that out of all the people that I've helped get to, whether it be Germany, US, Canada, or Britain, they're the most productive people you know, I've ever met. And what the Afghan Adjustment Act will do will automatically turn the parole status into an immigration status, which will allow them to have these opportunities to engage in the communities and engage with just society in general. I would say the second thing that people can do is, and this is what I do need to look up, is there are a lot of Afghan families that have been settled throughout the state. And, you know, they have maybe the support in terms of financial, but they don't have the community. They don't have the ability to navigate this new culture. So even just connecting with the family and just knowing them, letting them know that they're part of your community, that they're loved, they're cared for, and you know, they have a home here. That in itself, you know, really does wonders. We've had a couple families that have been settled out in the Midwest, and unfortunately, some of their kids have committed suicide because they just felt so alienated and so disconnected. And of course, they're coming into this country having endured just a tremendous amount of trauma. So I think, speaking in a church, I think we all know the power of community and the power of love and faith. So I think, you know, just doing what you're already doing and just sharing that is helpful in itself.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions.
Oh yeah.
I missed the beginning introduction, so I'm intrigued by this. My name is Carol and I work at the Kent Public Library. I have done pastoral health to families that are actually here. One is in Canton. Several, this reminds me of the situation with help with Syrian families. And we actually had someone come and speak at the library about a similar situation, about providing medical care and things like that, and also helping Syrians come to the country. So, and I'm really intrigued by the Minority Vets organization. I'd love to have connect with you and more aware of that in the community. But I missed is it a private company? I'm just trying to understand.
Oh, yeah.
You're a private company, like
So-
you represent a private company with, I'm trying to understand how the NGOs connect with private sector.
AMWell actually is a publicly traded company now. It went public a little over a year ago, and it is a telehealth company.
Okay.
So we got connected through Google reaching out to us and asking if we could volunteer assistance through telehealth and seeing if there's a way that we could offer medical help for the people that were stuck in Afghanistan and try to, combine forces with the power of Google and the other volunteers that wanted to assist time. So we were volunteering our telehealth resources for the people that were stuck in Afghanistan.
So pardon my tech ignorance, what do you need on the ground there? Like I'm fascinated with WhatsApp, all these things work.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I
So-
know WhatsApp is a free, but
And to give you more context to my background, Minority Vets is a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm a volunteer there, and AMPAA is also a 501c3 nonprofit. And right now I'm also a volunteer there because it just feels wrong to profit this. But we kept on approaching this thinking that we need this technology, like we need an ability to actually see the individual and that they would want to be seen. But what we quickly discovered is that there is the technology there to facilitate that, but people are often crowded together with their families, with their loved ones, so there isn't that kind of intrinsic privacy. And there really isn't a lot of understanding of, especially with mental health, like what mental health is. So we find that people just prefer like Signal and WhatsApp. I mean, basically, if I was going to categorize what I did for a month in August was just going on these apps, responding to messages, and then going on an email and sending an email. I mean, I was doing all this on my couch.
Yeah,
Like,
we tried to do telehealth, which is video visits
yeah.
with the patient and the provider, and in the US it's all HIPAA compliance, keeping all the privacy together. We were trying to get that international and keep everything HIPAA compliant for the patients. And what we found through this exercise was the patients on the ground either didn't have enough bandwidth to get it to function, or we couldn't get the technology to function in the region, or the technology could work, but the patients weren't comfortable with using it, with having the video on and seeing the providers. They didn't have the space, like, because they were there with their whole families. Like you couldn't get the privacy, or they just weren't comfortable with the video and the provider interface. So it was a lot of lessons learned of, I think maybe US-centric thinking of how telehealth works compared to Afghan
But
thinking.
even telehealth here, the socioeconomic differences. I
Yes.
mean, I think you saw it. Not everyone had the ability, didn't have the devices in their home, didn't have connections to Wi-Fi, we even saw that here in this country.
Yeah, there's a lot of socioeconomic challenges. Although I will say with many of the people that Hannah's been working with in Afghanistan, a lot of them at this point are on bases, on military bases, right? Or the ones that we're, at this point that we're targeting.
It's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people that are in refugee camps in the UAE and Qatar. There are also still a lot of people that are kind of stuck in the country right now. So those have different situations as well, because one has better access to resources, so you're able to kind of facilitate these meetings. But I think one of the things that we really learned, and I didn't have any background in kind of Afghan culture or kind of really working in any kind of international environment like this, at least not in a non-military setting. But we were definitely applying what we thought would be helpful, and I don't think we necessarily would have had the capacity or the ability to kind of tailor that to really best suit their needs at that point. But, you know, we quickly learned that we would have these Google forms where it's just like, hey, put your information here so we can kind of collect it, so we can kind of create a database, so, you know, we're able to kind of track you and make sure you're not getting lost throughout the process. But we'd have this one box that would say referred by, and it wasn't something you needed to actually fill in, but we would have so many people that would have all the information filled, but they didn't have somebody that they could put in the referred by, so they wouldn't submit the form. So, you know, it was, you know, making sure that instructions were clear, but it's also people at that time that, you know, we had people that were sitting outside the gate in the airport with their family, you know, for days on their phone. So having them, you know, try to even understand just or go through kind of a basic process was, you know, difficult in itself.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, the example you used, I mean, in an ideal world, if you get the way you can communicate with someone there, like I think they found, like I think if we can improve the resources, medical health resource they have there, on the ground there, and, you know, whether it be a physician or nurse here, communicating with someone there,
Yeah.
to kind of.
We did actually try to facilitate that. The problem with that was the doctors that we would have contact with, they're
The hospital system collapsed in the country, and the ones that remained, because we tried in Afghanistan, we were going to potentially work with the hospital that remained there, and we were trying to set up telehealth with the local hospital and try to have some coordination there, and we got close, and then the government collapsed, and we had to stop the efforts that we were going to be doing because it wasn't safe to set up what we were planning to set up. So there was a lot of turmoil with what we were doing, unfortunately. This was a lot of trial and error, and again, it was like the 5 of us volunteers attempting to do what we were doing, and there were times that it worked and times that it didn't.
And, you know, it was Kabul. I think people have this vision of Afghanistan as just mud huts and just kind of opium and just extreme poverty. But Kabul actually, over the 20 years that we were there, we were able to develop a pretty robust medical system. So they were able to perform pretty extensive procedures, and they still have some of that capacity in Kabul itself. The problem was in the regional hospitals, which were controlled by the military. And those hospitals did actually have, you know, at least moderate capabilities that we'd emphasize for them with the sturdy. But since they were run by the military, everybody that was associated with the military, they're not going to linger. You know, there was problems with trust. One of the